In the heart of New Haven, where the streets bustled with life, the air was thick with the promise of rain. The glow from street lamps cast a warm hue over the city, creating a cozy ambience that beckoned passers-by. Among them was David, a middle-aged man with unkempt hair and a weary expression. He walked slowly, his old backpack slung over one shoulder, weighted down not only by belongings but also by the burdens of life. As he approached a charming hotel adorned with ivy vines, David felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. He envisioned a warm welcome from the staff, a soft bed waiting for him after a long day of wandering. The hotel had a quaint charm, its wooden doors framed by vibrant flowers, a small fountain bubbling softly in the courtyard. With each step he took toward the entrance, David's heart swelled with anticipation, eager to escape the chill of the approaching storm. Upon entering, he was greeted by the lobby's inviting decor, plush armchairs, wooden beams, and the sweet scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. But his heart sank as his eyes met the receptionist, Mandy. Her friendly smile quickly vanished as she eyed his worn clothing with unmasked judgment. David approached the desk, feeling the weight of her scrutiny. "Hello. I'd like to book a room for the night, please," he said, his voice steady yet laced with hope. Mandy glanced at the computer screen, then back at him, her demeanor shifting abruptly. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're fully booked," she replied curtly, barely hiding her disdain. David's heart dropped, but he maintained his composure. "Is there anything available, perhaps?" he asked, desperation creeping into his tone. Mandy shook her head, clearly uninterested in helping. "You might try elsewhere," she said dismissively, her eyes already scanning the next guest approaching the desk. As David stepped back into the rainy night, he felt the weight of rejection. The air was thick with disappointment. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning of a journey that would unveil so much more than just a night's stay. As the rain poured relentlessly onto the asphalt, David hurried down the street, seeking shelter. The vibrant lights of the Grandview Hotel flickered invitingly, promising warmth and the comfort of a dry room. David adjusted the straps of his old, tattered backpack and took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The swirling scents of fresh coffee and baked pastries greeted him as he stepped through the hotel doors, making him momentarily forget the burdens he carried. However, that sense of comfort was quickly shattered by the welcoming glare of the hotel lobby. The polished marble floors sparkled under the brightly lit chandeliers, creating an atmosphere of elegance. As David approached the front desk, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety, a feeling he had grown accustomed to in recent times. Mandy, the receptionist, was busy typing on her computer when David approached. She peered up momentarily, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. David's unkempt beard and simple, weather-worn clothing seemed to provoke a split-second judgment. Her eyebrows furrowed, and without uttering a word, she returned to her screen, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as if his presence was a mere inconvenience. Finally, after a long moment of silence, David cleared his throat and said, "Good evening. I hope you have a room available for the night." His voice held a soft, yet hopeful tone, a stark contrast to the anxiety roiling within him. Mandy sighed, glancing again at her screen while shaking her head. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked for the night," she replied curtly, avoiding eye contact. David's heart sank. "Are you sure there's anything available? I can pay a reasonable rate." With a dismissive wave of her hand, Mandy replied, "You might want to try one of the budget hotels nearby. They often have vacancies." A hint of condescension dripped from her words, making it clear that she did not believe David was worth the time or effort. Feeling the weight of embarrassment wash over him, David turned away, the heavy backpack on his shoulders feeling like an anchor dragging him down. The juxtaposition of his current situation and the luxury surrounding him felt unbearable. But he reminded himself of who he was, someone who dared to dream. Despite any judgment he faced, as David stepped back into the rain, droplets cascading off the brim of his cap, he felt a sense of determination rising within him. Little did Mandy know that he was not just any ordinary man, but the owner of the very hotel that had just turned him away. With each step he took away from the hotel, the embers of inspiration sparked and ignited a burning desire to change perceptions and reveal truths that lay hidden beneath the surface. David stood in the lobby of the charming hotel, the warm glow of the chandeliers contrasting sharply with the chilly rain outside. He shifted his backpack on his shoulder and approached the reception desk with a hopeful smile. However, as soon as the receptionist, Mandy, caught sight of him, her expression shifted. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Taking in his simple clothing, a worn-out raincoat and scuffed shoes. "Good evening. I'd like to book a room for the night," David said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Mandy barely glanced at him as she typed on her computer. "I'm sorry, sir. It looks like we're fully booked for the night," she replied, her voice flat and laced with indifference. David's heart sank, but he pressed on. "Are there any cancellations or maybe a different room available?" he asked, barely believing his own insistence. "No, sir," Mandy replied, still focused on her screen. "Even if there were, I doubt it would fit your budget." The dismissive tone of her voice pierced through him more than the cold night air. He felt a pang of frustration but chose to maintain his composure. "Could you check the booking system again? Just in case," he requested politely. Mandy finally looked up, annoyance flickering in her eyes. "I'm telling you, we're fully booked. You might want to try a cheaper motel out of town," she said, eyeing him with a mixture of pity and disdain. David's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as he took a step back, feeling the weight of her judgment. He forced a smile and nodded. "Thank you for your time." Turning away, David walked out of the hotel, disappointment flooding through him. He never imagined that seeking a simple place to rest would come with such harsh rejection. As he stepped out into the rain, the droplets mingled with the stinging sensation in his eyes. He reminded himself that appearances could be deceiving. But her words lingered painfully, as he wandered the city streets. David couldn't shake the feeling of being judged unfairly. He reminded himself that he was not just a business owner, he was also a human being who had faced the same struggles as everyone else. If only Mandy had taken a moment to see beyond his surface, a reflection of so many lives grappling with the burdens of social disparity. Lost in thought, he stumbled upon a small park where an elderly man, Mr. Thompson, was sitting alone on a bench. Intrigued, David approached him, hoping for a distraction. As they engaged in conversation, the stories flowed between them, stories of hope, perseverance, and the kindness of strangers. In that moment, David was reminded of the very reasons he had chosen to dedicate his life to hospitality. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and connection amidst the pain of rejection. Little did he know. His brief encounter with the wise old man would change the trajectory of his journey at the hotel, leading him to a profound realization about empathy, community, and the importance of kindness in an unkind world. As the rain continued to pour down, David walked along the dimly lit streets of New Haven, shadows dancing under the flickering streetlights. Each step echoed the feeling of rejection, a weight heavy on his heart. It was a familiar feeling, one he had experienced countless times before as the owner of the hotel, yet still piercingly raw. He couldn't shake the disappointment of being treated unfairly, merely defined by his appearance rather than his true identity. Lost in thought, David found himself drawn to a nearby park, a small haven amidst the urban chaos. He ventured deeper into the park, where several benches provided a refuge from the rain. One particular bench caught his eye, occupied by an elderly man with deep-set wrinkles and kind yet weary eyes. The man, Mr. Thompson, sat hunched over, a blanket draped over his knees. Lost in thought, David felt an inexplicable urge to speak with him, and approached cautiously. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. Mr. Thompson looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to warmth. "Not at all, young man. Have a seat," he replied, patting the spot beside him. As they exchanged pleasantries, David noticed that Mr. Thompson's face lit up with each story he shared about his life. "You know," said the old man, "I've seen my fair share of struggles. But sometimes those struggles lead us to unexpected kindness. Just a few days ago, a stranger bought me coffee when I had forgotten my wallet. It lifted my day." Encouraged by Mr. Thompson's openness, David shared his own woes, speaking candidly about the rejection he faced at his hotel that evening. As he spoke, he noticed Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowing in understanding. "It's a shame how often we judge a book by its cover," Mr. Thompson mused. "So many stories go untold because of prejudice. But remember, young man, kindness can bloom in the most surprising places." These words struck a chord within David. He listened intently as Mr. Thompson recalled his youth, how he had faced challenges during the war, only to find compassion when he least expected it. The older man's experiences resonated with David's own aspirations of creating a welcoming space for everyone at his hotel. As the rain began to let up, David felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. Mr. Thompson's stories of resilience became a catalyst for David's thoughts. Perhaps he was meant for more than simply being the hotel owner, he could be an advocate for change. This encounter was not just a chance meeting, it felt like destiny nudging him in a new direction. With renewed determination, David thanked Mr. Thompson and promised to cherish the lessons learned. As he walked away, he knew that he was ready to confront the challenges ahead. What lay before him was a journey not just of self-discovery but an opportunity to pave the way for understanding and acceptance, both within his hotel and the larger community. David sat on a bench in the park across from the hotel, the sound of the rain drumming softly against the pavement. As he reflected on the recent rejection he faced at the front desk, a strong sense of determination enveloped him. The encounter with Mr. Thompson had ignited a fire within him to challenge the biases that often prevailed in the world, especially within his own establishment. He could not merely accept the status quo, he needed to shed light on the misconceptions that lay beneath the surface of daily interactions. With the rain finally tapering off, David made his way back to the hotel, his mind racing with ideas. He would reinvent himself, stepping into the shoes of an average guest, an ordinary traveler seeking comfort and warmth. He envisioned how this would allow him to witness firsthand the nuanced behaviors and judgments displayed by the staff. The plan began to take shape in his mind. A blend of stealth and insight that was both thrilling and intimidating. Arriving back at the hotel, David approached the front desk and greeted Mandy with a casual smile, reminiscent of the many customers he had played host to over the years. He masked his anxiety under a disarming facade of friendliness, casually asking if he could book a room for the night. As she typed away on her computer, David casually mentioned that he found a booking app promising affordable rates nearby. "Yes," Mandy exclaimed, looking momentarily frazzled. "You can check online. But it might be better to sign up for a shared room. We might have space there for a budget traveler like you." David's heart sank at her dismissive tone. A blatant reminder of how appearances could cloud judgment. Resolved, he quickly booked a shared room using an alias, John Smith, targeting the budget option. All the while on a silent mission to reveal the truths swirling around him. After establishing his new identity, David moved into the shared room, carrying an air of unassuming humility. While deep down, the weight of who he truly was hung like a veil. As he settled in, he noticed a group of guests chatting animatedly in the common area. One of them was Rachel, a young artist wearing vibrant clothes that matched her lively spirit. Intrigued by her enthusiasm and creativity, David initiated a conversation that quickly blossomed into a friendship. Over shared meals and late-night discussions, he learned about her dreams of becoming a renowned artist and her struggles to find acceptance in the competitive art world. Rachel's optimism and candidness fascinated David, and he realized how much her perspective differed from the judgment he had encountered at the front desk. This unexpected friendship fueled David's resolve to understand the hidden biases without the influence of his wealth and status. Perhaps, just perhaps, he would uncover the ways to bridge the gap between social classes at his hotel, challenging both his employees and guests to see beyond appearances. As the days rolled by, David felt invigorated by his mission. He had his plan set in motion, veiling his true identity while plotting to reveal the inherent prejudices existing within the hotel environment. His journey into anonymity was not just a quest for justice, it was also about fostering connections that transcended social barriers. He was ready to become the catalyst for change, determined to create a narrative that would challenge perceptions and inspire a culture of empathy. David settled into his shared room, the faint buzz of conversations echoing softly in the background. The walls were painted a warm beige, adorned with quirky art pieces from local artists, giving the place a unique charm. He looked around. There were 6 other guests, each with their own unique stories, hopes, and dreams. This diverse group would unknowingly play a pivotal role in David's plan to unveil the hidden biases of the hotel staff. As the days progressed, David took on the guise of a typical guest. He joined the communal dining area for breakfast each morning, where the rich aroma of coffee blended with the sound of cheerful laughter. It struck him how the staff treated the guests differently based on the clothes they wore, their accents, and even the accessories they carried. He felt both outrage and sadness as he observed people being judged by superficial standards. It was in this vibrant setting that he met Rachel, the aspiring artist whose bright spirit resonated deeply with him. Rachel was dressed in colorful, mismatched clothes that she often painted herself, and her stories of art exhibitions filled the room with creativity. As they conversed over pancakes and syrup, David found a companion who understood the struggles of being misunderstood. Rachel shared her experiences of being overlooked during her art school application process simply because the reviewers had dismissed her unconventional style. They didn't see my passion. Just my appearance, Rachel said. A hint of frustration in her voice. This resonated with David. He realized that he, too, had felt the sting of judgment. Especially from Mandy, and the staff who failed to see the man behind the backpack. Rachel's candor inspired David to dig deeper into the emotional landscape of his fellow guests. One afternoon, as they sat under a tree in the courtyard, David dropped hints about his ambitions and the nature of biases. You know? Sometimes I think people forget that we all have stories, he said thoughtfully. We look at each other and make assumptions based on our appearances. But if only we took a moment to understand one another. Their conversation opened the door to collective vulnerability. One by one, other guests joined in, sharing their own tales of misjudgment and resilience. David listened intently, taking notes that would later fuel his resolve to create change. He often pictured how the hotel staff would react to this tapestry of human experiences, a mixture of sorrow, regret, but ultimately a profound call to action for inclusivity. That night, as David prepared for his meeting with the staff, he felt a surge of anticipation. He knew this was not just about him revealing his true identity but also about giving a voice to everyone's experiences. The collective stories he had gathered were compelling evidence of how powerful empathy could be in the transformation of not just his hotel, but also the world outside its doors. As he drifted off to sleep, he envisioned the possibilities of change and healing that awaited them all. As the days went by, David settled into the shared room with a growing sense of purpose. Amidst the chatter of other guests, he found solace in the camaraderie that flourished between them. One evening, as they gathered for a casual dinner in the communal kitchen, he met Rachel, a spirited young artist with an infectious zeal for life. With her vibrant personality and warm smile, Rachel was a breath of fresh air that immediately drew David in. The kitchen was alive with laughter as guests shared stories of their travels and dreams. David listened intently, intrigued by Rachel's passion for art. She spoke fervently about her desire to exhibit her work in galleries and make a name for herself. Her enthusiasm reminded him of the dreams he once had before fully immersing himself in the hotel business. As they talked late into the night, David felt a bond forming, one that transcended their differences. Sometimes, people forget that everyone has a story, Rachel said, stirring her pot of stew. I think that's why we end up judging each other, because we don't take the time to listen. Her words struck a chord within David, resonating with the purpose of his secret mission. In those moments, he found his own vulnerability reflected back at him. Rachel, despite being a struggling artist, treated him with respect and kindness, completely oblivious to his true identity. Inspired by their conversations, David began to weave vulnerable anecdotes of his own past into their discussions. He shared tales of the challenges he faced in building the hotel, from the sleepless nights spent working through financial difficulties to the moments of regret when he allowed his ambition to overshadow the humanity of the business. Rachel listened, her eyes filled with understanding. One evening, sitting under the dim glow of fairy lights in the courtyard, Rachel shared her struggles with mental health and the pressure of societal expectations. It's hard to stay true to yourself, especially when people see you only for what you produce, she candidly admitted. I sometimes feel invisible, even in a crowded room. David felt a pang of empathy. He had often felt invisible in his own way, burdened by the weight of expectations that came with ownership. He realized the importance of the connections forged in that shared living space. Connections that could help break down the barriers created by judgment and prejudice. Together, David and Rachel devised a plan. They would host a small exhibition in the hotel's lobby, showcasing not only Rachel's artwork but also the stories of the guests. Their vision was to create a space where everyone felt valued, regardless of their background. This initiative would allow guests to share their stories, fostering understanding and empathy. As David worked alongside Rachel to bring their vision to life, he began to see a shift in himself as well. He was no longer just the hotel owner, he was a helper, a friend, a bridge between worlds. Rachel's uplifting presence instilled a renewed sense of collective purpose in him. And in that moment, David learned that sometimes it takes unexpected friendships to challenge our views and open our hearts. The sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue through the elegant lobby of the hotel. But the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. David stood behind the reception desk, his heart racing, as he prepared for the meeting he'd orchestrated. All the staff had been called in for a mandatory discussion, though they didn't know just how profound this would be. As the last employee, Mandy, took her place among her colleagues, David's resolve strengthened. "Thank you for gathering, everyone," David started, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. The employees exchanged curious glances, bewildered by the owner's sudden presence amidst their usual duties. "I know this may come as a surprise, but I wanted us to have an honest conversation today." Silence enveloped the room, and the tension was palpable. David paused, gathering his thoughts. "For the past week, I have been staying here, observing how our guests are treated." He paused to let the statement sink in, watching their expressions shift from confusion to concern. "Specifically, I've noticed how we often judge individuals based on their appearance, especially how some guests were treated differently than others. I documented these experiences, and I believe it's crucial for us to address them." Mandy's face flushed as she realized the implications of his words. You were here all along," she stammered, unable to hide her surprise. "Yes. And while I appreciate the hard work all of you do, I was disheartened to witness how quickly judgments were made." David took a deep breath and activated the clips of his hidden camera recording, projecting the footage onto a nearby screen. Each scene revealed the stark reality: guests overlooked because of their modest attire, snickers behind closed doors about a backpacker's lack of sophistication, and blatant dismissals, in some cases. Even hostile remarks, that illuminated a culture of bias hidden beneath the hotel's polished veneer. The room filled with gasps and expressions of disbelief. "I had no idea," Mr. Morales, the head chef, murmured, his voice barely above a whisper as he watched the footage. "I thought we were treating everyone the same." David's heart ached as he witnessed the sorrow wash over his staff's faces. "This is not just about you as individuals, it's about how our actions reflect on the entire hotel and our clientele. Every guest deserves respect, regardless of their background. It is essential for us to foster an environment of inclusivity and understanding." Once the clips concluded, the room fell into a heavy silence. David felt a mixture of anger and disappointment but also hope as he observed their reactions. Slowly, the staff began to speak up. "I never thought of it that way," Mandy admitted, her voice trembling. "I apologize, David. I see now how we failed our guests." Mr. Thompson called on his experience. "We need to change how we approach our work. It starts with us." Encouraged by the wave of sincerity, David nodded. "Together, we can create initiatives, training, and policies to ensure our hotel is a beacon of hospitality. Not just for a select few but for everyone who crosses our threshold. As the staff rallied around their owner, a sense of unity rose within the room, igniting a passion to transform their work environment. David smiled, feeling reassured that their collective efforts could bring about meaningful change. This confrontation marked the beginning of a new chapter, not only for the hotel but for each individual within it. As the heaviness of the revelation hung in the air, David took a deep breath, trying to gauge the reactions of the hotel staff. The meeting room was silent, filled with a mix of confusion, embarrassment, and tentative acknowledgement that they had failed in their duty. There they were, a team of individuals working in hospitality, yet lacking the most foundational principle of their profession, empathy. "Look, I didn't come here to punish anyone," David began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I wanted to shed light on the inherent biases that, whether consciously or subconsciously, affect how we treat one another. It's not just about hospitality, it's about humanity." Mandy, the receptionist, who had once turned him away, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her cheeks flushed with shame. "I'm sorry," she murmured, looking directly at David. "I made assumptions based on how you looked. And that was wrong. We need to do better." Encouraged by her sincerity, David smiled gently. "It starts with acknowledgement. Shall we work together to change this?" With that simple question, a wave of relief washed over the staff. A collective understanding that this moment was not about guilt but growth. Slowly, hands began to rise as various employees voiced their realizations. Tom, the bellboy, shared how he had often overlooked guests who weren't dressed in high-priced attire, believing that their tips would be inadequate. Lisa, the housekeeper, spoke of the discomfort she occasionally felt in the staff room when discussing guests who appeared out of place. Each employee's voice added to the expanding tapestry of shared experiences that highlighted the pressing need for compassion and unity. Together, they brainstormed actionable changes that could reshape the hotel's culture. Ideas flowed freely: diversity training workshops, monthly staff reflections, and developing a welcome philosophy that emphasized appreciating every guest's story, no matter their background. David could see the eagerness in their eyes, a spark igniting within them that unquestionably filled him with hope. "Let's make this hotel a beacon of acceptance," David proposed, embodying the progression towards a new era for their workplace. "Let's ensure that every guest, whether they are clad in designer labels or a simple t-shirt, feels seen and valued." As the meeting drew to a close, David felt a sense of fulfillment. The staff had transformed from a group that had unwittingly perpetuated biases into advocates for change. They stood united, ready to turn the page and rewrite the story of the hotel together, one founded on respect, inclusivity, and the recognition of shared humanity. In the days that followed, David witnessed the atmosphere of the hotel alter dramatically. The employees engaged with guests in genuine ways, sharing warm smiles and thoughtful conversation. David knew the transformation was just beginning, and he was grateful to be part of it. The hotel was no longer merely a place for transient stays, it was evolving into a sanctuary where stories mattered, and every individual felt like they belonged. As he walked through the lobby, the sound of laughter and camaraderie surrounded him. He smiled, knowing that they were all on this journey together, and he looked forward to seeing how much further they could go. As the sun began to rise over New Haven, bathing the hotel lobby in a warm, golden glow. David leaned against the front desk, his heart swelling with pride. The atmosphere had changed dramatically since his awakening experience. Gone were the days of dismissive glances and judgment based on appearances. Now, the hotel buzzed with a sense of unity and acceptance. Guests checked in with genuine smiles and laughter, creating a vibrant tapestry of interactions. David looked around, observing the staff engaging with patrons, their eyes alight with respect and kindness. The conversations flowed freely, and a newfound spirit of camaraderie permeated the hotel corridors. People from all walks of life mingled, sharing stories and forming connections, reflecting the very essence of what hospitality should represent. One afternoon, David gathered the staff in the hotel's elegant conference room. The once awkward tension had transformed into palpable excitement. They had actively begun implementing policies he had advocated for, introducing workshops focused on empathy and diversity, encouraging staff to engage with guests beyond mere transactions. These sessions fostered open dialogue and self-reflection, allowing the team to revisit their biases and the impact of their choices. As we stand here today, I want to commend each one of you for your commitment to change. David began, his voice steady. You've not only embraced the concept of inclusivity, but you've also made it a living, breathing part of our hotel's culture. This transformation is not just about creating a better experience for our guests, it's about fostering genuine connections among ourselves. Rachel stood at the back, nodding in agreement. She had become an advocate for the changes, encouraging guests to share their stories and experiences, weaving a narrative of acceptance across the hotel. David's heart warmed as he witnessed her passion, knowing how instrumental she had been in driving this movement. As days turned into weeks, the hotel became a sanctuary of acceptance. An event called Share Your Story was introduced, where guests could come together, narrate their experiences of struggle and triumph, and learn from one another. It was heartwarming to see individuals connecting on a deeper level, breaking down stereotypes and fostering understanding. David felt a surge of hope as he marveled at the positive impact they were creating. The hotel wasn't just a business, it had metamorphosed into a community hub, embodying kindness and compassion. Each encounter became a catalyst for change, reminding everyone that empathy is a universal language. Standing in the lobby, David watched as guests left with tokens of gratitude, handwritten notes of appreciation, small acts of kindness exchanged, and friendships forged. This is the change we sought, he thought, a satisfied smile forming on his lips. Let's continue spreading awareness and embody the values we hold dear. One story at a time, with renewed purpose. David came to realize that this journey was only the beginning. Together, they could continue pushing boundaries, creating spaces that celebrated diversity, and embraced every individual for who they truly are, transcending societal prejudices and judgment. And so, the promise of change echoed throughout the hotel, inspiring new stories yet to unfold.